the end of Ecclesiastes, it says that he wrote Proverbs, wrote a bunch of Proverbs, and that's what this book is the Proverbs that he wrote. And so chronologically, the book of Proverbs precedes Ecclesiastes, but it really doesn't matter what order you look at, because they both are kind of going the same thing. The Proverbs are a lot of his conclusions put into proverb form, and but there's 9 chapters before he even gets into the Proverbs. 9 chapters of basically, here's why I want to say all these Proverbs, and we'll get into that this morning. Some of it in chapter 1. Oh, speaking of chapter 1, anybody that wants, these are just note sheets that you want to hand off. Just a place you can write notes if you want to, if you need something. So I have a question to start off with, and that is, what is a proverb? In your own idea, how would you describe a proverb? Sue? A word of wisdom, okay.
It's just word of thinking.
Okay. Anybody else have something to add to that? A word making life for Chad?
Just because I know the Greek word, because I just studied this comparison, I think is what the Greek word.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, here's a definition that I wrote down. A proverb in the Bible is a short, memorable saying that expresses a general truth for practical, godly living. It's just a quick way of saying something that you could take half an hour to talk about. Is putting it kind of concisely in a way, and it's written in such a way that they're easy to remember. And of course, that's when you're doing everything orally, which is the way that they had to do stuff in Solomon's day, because they obviously didn't have a printing press or anything like that. Nope, you could write out the book of Proverbs, but nobody would be able to afford to buy it, because it would cost the equivalent of $1,000 or something like that to buy an actual paper copy of it. And so they did a lot of word of mouth stuff, a lot of in songs they did. And that's what the whole book of Psalms is about. They're all singing things, singing messages from God and God's word, but being able to remember them better because you're singing it. Proverbs were the same thing, only you were saying it instead. And so the shorter and more memorable you can make it, obviously the better chance you would have it tomorrow after you learned it today, or maybe next week or the week after. So that's what Proverbs are. And just to get an example, in modern day terms, we have a phrase like, when I say modern, these aren't like yesterday. These are in our generation or the generation before, but we have all heard this one. Rome was not built in a day. That's pretty easy to remember, right? But what does it actually mean?
Take time to do anything worthwhile.
Yeah, you think, well, okay, Rome was a big city, big modern city. You don't just throw up a big modern city in a day. It takes a while to do it. And anything worth doing is going to take time. You need patience to do it with. So that's the idea of a proverb. Here's another one. Measure twice and cut once. Any of you ladies ever heard that one? I know anybody that's a carpenter has heard that one. So what does that mean? You have to measure it twice, or
You want to double check.
okay, and why would you want to do that? Because people are people and they make mistakes, right? And so you want to make sure you are doing it before you cut, because after you cut, what is it? You can't change it after that. If it don't fit, it ain't going to fit, so Um, that's another proverb. Is that easy to remember? Of course it is. Measure twice, cut once. Uh, in I took a drafting course in college, and his advice to us students was measure twice, draw once. And you don't end up having to redraw the whole thing, because they required perfection of anything that you drew. And so couldn't have a lot of erase marks and all that kind of stuff. So it can be, you can put anything in there besides cut. But okay, so here's another one. Don't judge a book by its cover.
Think that every time I look for books.
So if you, a lot of times you look at a book and it may have the most boring cover that you could find, a dark green binding with, white side or something like that. And you think, doesn't really appeal to me just by looking at the cover, but it could be Les Miserables or something, some really good book. So what does it mean? I mean, is it just talking about books? Anytime you pick up a book, don't judge it. What is that?
Judge by initial appearance.
Okay, judge what? Anybody, a person or a thing. And so this is the idea. I mean, we all understand the modern day Proverbs. The biblical Proverbs has some characteristics as well, just like our modern day ones. A biblical proverb is short and concise, crafted to be easily memorized. What does concise mean?
Short and exactly how.
Okay, to the point, just putting it all together in a neat package, I guess you would say. So that's one of the characteristics, short and concise. It also, they express a general truth. And by that, what I mean is describing something that's usually true, God's moral order, not an absolute promise, like raise up a child in the way he should go and he will not depart from it. Generally, it's true. You raise a child right and they will stay with God. You make mistakes along the way and they might not. But even if you don't ever make a mistake, kids have their own free will. No matter what you do, you can do the very best thing that can possibly be done. They still have the opportunity to follow after, go down a wrong path or whatever. So it's generally true, but not absolutely true necessarily. So you don't take, well, okay, just this one, raise up a child. Well, I have two kids that don't go to church and everything. Did I make a mistake? Well, yeah, I did. I made mistakes, but even if I hadn't made mistakes, they still have their own free will, and you can't draw conclusions. We're going to talk a little bit about Job this morning in the lesson, and that's one thing he did. And his friends, they made a mistake. Bad things happened to Job, and so they decided, well, then he must have done something bad. What did you do, Job, that made all this bad stuff happen to you? Well, as it turns out, it wasn't anything Job did. It was a test. I'm not going to get into that story, but things aren't necessarily the same as what they look like necessarily. Another characteristic of a biblical proverb is its practical wisdom. Practical means you can do it in everyday life, something that helps you just get along in life. It's practical. It might affect your character or your decision making or whatever, but it's just ways to help you along the way. Like he had said in Ecclesiastes, I said about to find out how to get through life, and these proverbs tell a lot about how to get through life by stating all these things that are short and easy to remember. Another qualification is they're rooted in comparison. Chad, you just brought that up. The Hebrew word mashal means to be like. And it's comparing something, like a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. It's not really saying that, but it conveys a like idea. So it's rooted in comparing something to something else. And then finally, it was part of Israel's wisdom tradition, alongside with Job and Ecclesiastes and some Psalms. There are Proverbs in all of these books, but obviously Proverbs has by far the most actual Proverbs in there. But the book itself is part of the wisdom tradition, the oral tradition that the Jewish people grew up living with all of their life. So with those things in mind, we're going to get into the book itself. But before I do, does anybody have anything that you can think of that might be good to talk about by way of introduction to the book? Okay, well, I just wanted to give you a chance. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything like that. This isn't a test, but so the Proverbs, chapter 1 through 9, are not Proverbs. Like those short, concise statements. What they are doing, you could sum it all up by these words at the bottom: wisdom personified. And what does it mean when you personify something?
Take it personal, use it personally.
No, you treat it. Chad?
You make it alive, something that's not a living thing, you give it life.
Okay, something that's not living, you put it in the place of somebody or something that is alive. In this case, he's going to see wisdom is not a physical characteristic. So what he's going to do is he's going to compare it to a woman. Wisdom is a woman, and all through these chapters, he's going to say, she says, she says, she says, but he's talking about wisdom speaking to us. So he's personifying wisdom as a woman, and you'll see it as we go along. He starts off, first of all, by stating the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Now, we know that David was the first king of that Israel ever had, and no, he's not either. Saul was the first king, David was next, and then Solomon was David's son and took David's place when David passed on, and he became king. David had been a warring king, and so God would not allow him to build the temple, but he allowed Solomon to build the temple, and that's one of the great privileges anybody could have ever had, because the temple was the dwelling place of God. God said, I'll put my presence there in the most holy place. And so it was a great privilege for Solomon to be able to do that. And he had tremendous wisdom. In the introduction to Ecclesiastes, we talked about how Solomon had asked for wisdom when he could have asked for anything. God says, what would you like me to give you? And so God gave him riches as well and power. And so he was one of the most powerful men, one of the most rich men that ever lived, and the wisest man that ever lived. And so this is the guy that's writing these Proverbs. He definitely has a resume. And then he says why. Here's why I'm doing it. It's my purpose: to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, and to the young man knowledge and discretion. So with that last sentence, we start getting a hint of who he's writing to. He says, to the young man, wisdom and instruction. Later on, he's just going to say, my son. And so he's really, first and foremost, he's talking to Rehoboam, his son, the one that was going to take his place, and the one that was in Solomon's mind when he was writing Ecclesiastes, saying, who knows what's going to happen when you pile up a bunch of stuff and you leave it to somebody else. You don't know what's going to happen to it after that. Thing is, just enjoy it while you've got it. And So anyway, we get a hint that he's talking to his son here. You'll see it more clearly as we go along. But all these things are almost repeating the idea along: knowing wisdom and instruction, understanding, instruction of wisdom, and that involves justice, prudence to the simple. I guess we could talk about what does prudence mean. We don't use that word very much anymore. Maybe we'll say prudent. Is it prudent that we do this or something like that? But what does that mean?
Understanding. Well thought out.
Okay, yeah, well thought out, the wise thing to do, I guess you might say. And the simple. When he says the simple, who's he talking about? Well, besides talking about Sue, who else is he talking about? He's talking about ignorance. That's what the word simple means, ignorance. And I'm not talking about ignoramus. I'm talking about somebody that's ignorant, that doesn't know stuff. Well, I didn't say you were ignoramus. You said it first anyway. So, but anyway, whenever you see the word simple in the Bible, it's talking about somebody that's lacking knowledge. It's not talking about a simpleton or somebody that maybe it doesn't have all the tools in the shed. It's not talking about that. It's just talking about somebody that is a greenhorn, doesn't know stuff yet. And so I'm writing this stuff to help somebody that's a fledgling, a new guy coming along that doesn't know a lot, to help them to know stuff, to know wisdom, to know understanding, and so that they can make good decisions with their life is what it's directed at. So then in verse 4, he says, a wise man will hear and increase learning. So he's starting to really to state, here's what I hope for you, Rehoboam, or anybody else that reads this. A wise man will hear and increase learning. Now, what's the opposite of that?
Being not wise and
Doing something.
You turn a deaf ear. If somebody tries to give you advice, they're another generation, we know better now. Or even if you're not talking about generations, your parents tell you something, and when you're a teenager, you might slough it off and they don't really know what they're talking about. And then later on, when you get in your 20s or 30s, you realize, oh yeah, they really did know what they were talking about first place. And what he's trying to do is just say, look, Rehoboam, if you're wise, you'll listen to what this is saying. And by doing that, you will increase learning. You'll become smarter, you become wiser, more knowledgeable. And he says, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel. A man of understanding is going to look, okay, who do I know that has been around and knows about this stuff? Who can I ask? I want to get wise counsel. That's what he's saying. Here's what my hope is for you. If you don't know something, get advice somebody that is a wise person that does know stuff. And then he says in verse 6, to understand a proverb and an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles. So he's going to be putting a bunch of proverbs out there, but some of them are enigmas. And what is an enigma? If you can pronounce it. Okay, that's exactly it. An enigma is a mystery, something that you don't know the answer to. You want to understand that. You want to understand these enigmas, things that you have not figured out what they mean yet. And you want to understand the wise and their riddles. A lot of times people put stuff into riddles, and Jesus did that. And a lot of the Proverbs were riddles. Not Proverbs, but a lot of the parables were riddles. And the disciples would come to him and say, what does that mean? Explain this to us. Well, somebody that's wise, they'll hear those things and seek to understand it and get wise counseling so that they can understand when people put things in a way that to you is it's a riddle, hard to understand. Okay, then in verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And when he says fear, does he mean be abjectly afraid, shaking in your boots? Okay, reverence is there. The shaking in your boots fear could be there. I mean, that's part of the fear of God. I like to use the analogy of if there was a lion chained outside and the chain came through and it came up to right there. And the lion comes walking at me and I know that he's chained. Am I going to be abjectly fear? No, but I will have a whole lot of respect. How much would you have to pay me to walk over there by the door? You couldn't pay me enough to do that because I wouldn't get any farther than that. I'd be eaten alive and you get your money back. So that's what reverence is having a healthy respect. Because why? Because there's power there and power that will be used either for you or against you. You need to respect that and know there's a lot to be gained from God, but it has to be like he said in Ecclesiastes, fear God and keep his commandments. That's what we're all about. And he's saying the same thing here too. That is the very first principle. That's what we're all about, is respecting God. I mean, that's why we're put on this earth, is to respect God, give him the glory that he deserves. And if we accomplish that in our life, that's what we're here. That's what we've done. You've been a success in this life. Even if you never had a dime to your name, if you have respected God and done what he asked us to do, that's a successful life. Now, when I said if you never had a penny, I doubt if that, or a dime, I doubt if that would ever happen, because God is a blessing God, and he blesses those who follow his will. So that probably never would happen. But the very beginning of knowledge is respect for God. Well, part of why that is because there's knowledge that comes from all different sources, right? You can go to Nostradamus and get some knowledge about stuff, or you can go to Plato, whatever, you can get some knowledge. But where does the knowledge come from that you can trust and that is the true wisdom? It's God. Respecting God and giving him the credit. This is the guy that knows all the answers. He's the guy that can give us the advice that we need to tell us how to live this life and what the best things to do, what are good things to do, all that kind of stuff. So the very first thing is you need to develop a respect for God. How do you develop a respect for God? Okay.
Just common sense tells you so much about the Bible.
Okay. Those are all good things. Anybody else have another idea of how you get to fear the Lord? Sue she could have gone deeper in talking about knowing God's word. What's in God's word that would make you feel like the fear that we've just been talking about?
That have gone on before.
Okay, you see Nadab and Abihu going against a command of God, and what happened to them? Fire came down from heaven, and destroyed them, should that put fear into you about, oh, am I going to offer strange fire? How many people did it after that happened to them? Nobody. Nobody did. I don't want that to happen. How many people do you think touched the Ark of the Covenant after uh, Uzzah? Yeah, after Uzzah steadied it. Uh, that's how you learn. Okay, I see what God can do, what He will do, but I also can see all the great ways that He blesses people, and I respect that as well. He's just. When you see that He makes decisions, did He ever do something just out of pure spite or anger? No. And
Well, there were a few times he would like to. You know, like, Sodom and Gomorrah, for example.
right,
You
but
know, he wanted to just strike them right then, and, Lot was like, well, if you find 50 people, and he got down to what, 5? If there's just 5,
yeah.
so.
Well, I should have said more spite. Um, you can do stuff out of spite because you don't like somebody. You would do it, and God never does. He's not a spiteful God, and you see that when He does things, it's just. They deserve it. Sodom and Gomorrah deserved what happened to them, and so just respect and know God. He knows everything. He loves us so much that He gave us His Son. Where do you learn that? In the book you got in your hand, the Bible. Uh, learning that stuff, that's where you learn to fear God. Is when you learn what He is who He is and what He's capable of and what He wants to do, what He wants you to do. That's where the fear of the Lord comes. But the beginning of knowledge, if you're not basing your search for knowledge on what God wants, what's going to happen is you're going to be following after some man that may or may not have, well, he's not going to have all the answers for sure. It may not be somebody that you can trust. And so you want to be careful and make sure everything compares with what God has for us. So that's the very beginning of knowledge, trying to impress on His son, Rehoboam. If you don't do anything else after I'm gone, respect God and follow after Him. That's what we're here for. That's what we're all about. Contrary to that, the word "but" means contrast. Here's one thing. On the other hand, here's what's not. He says, "But fools despise wisdom and instruction." What's a fool?
Yeah.
That's the things that's the only direction they see from private. So in direct contrast to that, to in the opposite direction.
Okay. A fool is somebody that doesn't use their brain, essentially. Here's what you should do. Well, here's what I'm gonna do. That's foolishness. You do stuff even when you know better than to do it, you still do it. That's foolishness. Somebody that doesn't fear the Lord. Well, I know you should. I hear you, Solomon, fear the Lord, but on the other hand, what's wisdom? It's not what it's cracked up to be. That's foolishness, of course. A fool despises wisdom and instruction. But what he's telling him, Rehoboam, is if you do despise wisdom and instruction, what are you? You're a fool, Rehoboam. So just keep in mind, you don't want to be a fool. You need to respect wisdom and instruction. And now in verse 8 is where he says it straight out. My son, hear the instruction of your father. Do not forsake the law of your mother, for they will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck. So, Sue?
Do we know who, Rehoboam's mother was?
Yeah. it was, I believe it was, um, ooh, no, I don't remember. I'm not sure. I think it says, but I can't remember. If anybody else knows, feel free to volunteer that information. But he's saying, listen to your folks. I mean, how many times have we ever said that to our own kids? You got to listen to your parents. We know stuff. Well, that's what he's saying. Listen to what they're trying to instruct you in. They know more than you think they do, and don't forsake the rules. You know, okay, I grew up. Here's the rules of the house. I do them. I follow after them. I'm 18 now. I don't have to do any of that stuff. Well, what kind of person are you if you go off and start doing whatever you want to do? You're one of these guys that's a fool. You despise, you went with it because you respected them and knew that you're going to get some consequences if you didn't, so you did. But once you're free, I'm 18 now, I can do whatever. Yeah, that's the foolishness that he's talking about. You need to respect that. And here's why. Here's that little word "for," which means here's why. Do that. It says for, and here's why. They will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck. Does that mean you'll be in some kind of bondage? You got a chain around your neck? What's he talking about? Okay, it's necklaces, gold and silver, pearls, and all that kind of necklaces. I was going to say we don't do that today as far as guys are concerned, but you look at any of those football players, those big, huge gold chains they've got around their neck. What's that telling us? I got some bucks. And so it makes you look important and perhaps even be important. You wouldn't have enough money to buy that gold chain if you weren't a pretty good football player. And so it just shows that, yeah, I've arrived. I'm one of the best guys kind of thing. And so if you listen to your parents, that will be something that people look at, and it's like if you had all these chains around your neck, a graceful ornament on your head, people will respect you because you respected your parents. People will think, yeah, there's a successful person, and they know how to follow after the wisdom of their parents. Any comments, questions on that one? Nima? Nema. Okay.
She came from royal lineage, and because he was part of the lineage, she's named several times in the lineage.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. Appreciate that. It is interesting to hear that she was an Ammonite, one of the foreign wives that Solomon had. Sue?
Well, but fools despise wisdom. How many people have studied the Bible with somebody and they say, well, I don't think that's gonna happen, or I don't think that, well, I think, and they put themselves there, and that's the fool.
Yeah.
You can't put yourself higher than God.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's what's frustrating about trying to talk to people. Somewhere along their line, they've learned that, they've been told you are a perfect child, all this kind, never say a bad word, that kind of stuff. And they grew up feeling very privileged. And so, I don't have to listen to anybody else. And yeah, so that kind of,
Go to church and, obey what God's commanded us to do. And they'll say, well, I believe in God, but I don't think I have to go to church. I don't think I have to do what the Bible says, and
yeah,
they totally become fools.
right. And so we don't want to be that. I mean, anybody can be that. you need to make sure whatever you're deciding to do, that it matches up with God. The fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. Okay, I think I'm just going to stop right here because it gets going along into another little bit of different subject matter. So appreciate your attention. We'll be back together again in 17 minutes or so to begin our worship service.